Good evening and welcome to Screentone Club. This is episode 50. Woohoo, nice round number. We are recording on the 3rd of May 2020 for release on the 5th of May 2020. My name is Elliot Page. Currently avoiding the Red Bull sponsored Age of Empires 2 online tournament to do this podcast. And joining me as always is my lovely co-host, Mr. Andy Hanley. How you doing, Andy?
Is there anything that Red Bull won't sponsor at this point? I feel like whenever anything comes up, it's just like it's sponsored by Red Bull at this stage.
Probably not. Of course, being Red Bull, they also have this energy drinked up game format where they skip out what would be the first half an hour of a game, which, I don't know, gets you to action faster, but also means that people are in chat going, why are there so many? What's going on? And it's I don't know, it's really fun just to see people playing online Age of Empires in the year 2020. There's something weirdly heartening about the fact that the game has enough staying power and strategy that people are still playing it now.
Yeah, I do find, I mean, just generally, I'm getting off topic already, but I always find those communities incredible in general of people who are playing really ancient games and kind of doing amazing things with them still. There is an online multiplayer community for Sensible World of Soccer. People have hacked multiplayer into that game, via Amiga emulators and stuff, and it's just even that is too rich for my blood as somebody who's just gone to play FIFA, but I find it kind of fascinating that people are sticking with 20 plus year old games and hacking new rosters onto them and just still bolting things onto them, and it's really kind of amazing whenever that happens.
I guess at this point, it's the only way to avoid games that have loot boxes built into them, like FIFA.
But hey. Yeah, that is also true.
Yeah, I suppose it's the credit to these sort of staying power of games. And to segue horribly, also you see that in manga, where you see, well, obviously, I'm reading On and Off Ranma Half, which has been around since the 80s and is still considered one of the megatons with good reason, because one, it's good, and two, Rumiko Takahashi owns half the island. So, things stick around for a good reason. Although I will admit there's less bolting on in manga, thankfully, because sometimes you just don't want DLC for an old manga.
You don't need to patch in kind of whatever changes, new screen tone plugged into your old manga.
Now with 60% more flowers in the foreground.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. So, this is not a podcast about video games. It's about manga with a focus on joint discussion. We do this every fortnight. We're currently sprucing in a lot more bonus episodes as well, and sort of impromptu episodes, because we're all on lockdown and going crazy. And so a bit more content to help distract you is always welcome. As always, we quickly mention we have a Patreon. For the mere sum of $1 a month US, you can support us, and that really helps keep the lights on, defer the cost of manga, etc., etc. And if you back us from the $3 and up tier, you also get to vote on what we cover in our monthly Patreon only bonus episodes. The bucket of votes is actually quite low at the moment, and I've been badgering people like buggery to get them to vote. So if you do vote and you are a patron, one, thank you very much. Two, please consider voting even if you don't normally. You don't have to think that you're taking on some big responsibility. Just send us what you think we should look at, and that's totally rad. So yeah, please feel free to go ahead and vote, as even one or two votes could totally swing the winner for this month. Also on the Patreon bent is our shoutouts tier to Mr. Rob Jessup, who very kindly supports us at the shoutouts tier. As always, Rob, thank you very much. And so, yeah, moving on from the Patreon guff into the actual manga. So first and foremost is Returning Champions, where we cover series that we have discussed previously on the podcast and we're coming back to. And so I mentioned for both of these, I want to hear what you thought about them, Andy. So I'm going to hand over to you for the first two entries in this segment, if you don't mind.
Cool, sure thing. So as I've had a week off work, I've had time to catch up with at least a few manga that have had recent volumes come out. And the first one of those was Volume 3 of Kaiju Girl Caramelise, which we have discussed Volumes 1 and 2 of on a couple of shows here. And, having enjoyed that, and I feel like increasingly enjoyed it as time and those first two volumes went on. I was kind of pretty hyped and pretty ready to read a third volume. And it didn't disappoint, to be quite honest. I think the nice thing about this series is that there's a very clear feeling of progression through it. Like, by the time you get to the end of volume 3, like, you're kind of seeing characters actually kind of growing and learning from their mistakes and learning from kind of their life experiences. Because, I mean, I think we've all read series, especially romance series in the past, where, I mean, we've often much maligned the constant, like, misunderstandings, but the other side of that is often characters just keep falling into the same pitfalls over and over again. And that can be kind of really annoying. Whereas this series, you know, it feels like all of the main characters are kind of getting opportunities to grow and figure things out about themselves. And, I mean, Kulo in this volume in particular kind of really comes into her own. Like, you know, she's still kind of having all sorts of issues around her own kind of self-confidence, and now that she's actually kind of effectively together with Arata, like, that's kind of helped in some ways and hindered her in others, because now she has a whole bunch of other things to worry about. But this third volume actually kind of sees her moving to a different class, like it's a new school year and they do the usual jumbling up of classes because, I don't know, teachers are cruel. And so she ends up kind of in with what looks like it's going to be a nightmare. Like, it's a bunch of all the kind of the cool girls who are surely going to pick on her for, like, not being one of the cool kids. But as it turns out, kind of the head of that group is totally into Kulo. Like, they just kind of hit it off straight away. This girl is kind of really into makeup and makeup products. And as it turns out, there's kind of a good reason for that. And she actually has some major kind of self-confidence issues of her own that are pretty deep-seated. And the nice thing about this volume is it kind of gives Kulo a chance to, see other people, that she's not alone in the sense of kind of having issues about, like, how she's seen by others, and, you know, a kind of a desperation to resolve that. And it also lets her kind of use those experiences and quite frankly, like, her own abilities to help somebody else out. And it's a really kind of enjoyably sort of little heartwarming kind of tale that almost pulls away for a decent chunk of this volume from kind of the romance element, and just kind of lets Kulo, like, breathe on her own and kind of find her own feet in some certain ways. So, I really enjoyed this volume. Like, it's kind of use of the whole sort of monster analogy for kind of like teenage body confidence and self-confidence issues is a little bit on the nose in this volume. Like, it kind of risks almost wrapping around on itself to the point where it kind of loses part of the message. But I think the core of it is pretty solid, and I really had a good time with it. So I'm kind of on board for yet more of this whenever volume 4 rolls around.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. I mean, I really enjoyed the introduction of the new character whose name I've completely forgotten. But she was also a sweetie where, like, you know, it didn't, like, the series does a lot of things and it cuts out a lot of guff that is nice to get away from. Like, the misunderstandings and misapprehensions around the new character last all of like 2 pages. And then it's like, oh no, we're friends now. And also, like, you know, that rebounds to Kuro's own development because she's doing things that would have been a complete and utter mystery, like, even a volume ago. Arata also pulling in some nice support and being helpful and also growing himself, which really helps. And it kind of has that really kind of heartening element to it where, you know, the cast, you are in with the cast now and they are doing their own thing and are being sweeties about it, quite frankly. The new character, again, forget her name, but Makeup Girl, she's really great. And I was kind of surprised about how quickly they condensed her entire storyline and resolution. But at the same time, I'm extremely glad that they kind of got through it in consecutive chapters so that she's not like become another ongoing storyline. She has a resolution, a slightly painful one, but a resolution nonetheless to her storyline, like in this volume. I mean, it doesn't mean her problems and issues go away, but it's a nice healthy element to it, which actually is very pleasant to see in the series where it's like, oh, even like away from the rest of the series, this is a nice message. There's also some more good Jumbo King content who mostly seems to exist to be squeezed to half death in this. And it also has like perhaps the most amusing but also teenager thing is like Kuro's version of putting her face into a pillow and kicking her legs up and down on the bed is turning into a kaiju and screaming. Which I don't know, like sometimes you feel like you want to do that even as an adult. Whereas if you're a teen, yeah, I'd totally turn into a kaiju and start yelling. But yeah, it also, you know, plays around with Kuro quite a lot. Like she's kind of like kaijuing out a lot more partially at this stage because she's she's starting to find herself and find her own heart almost, but at the same time, it's like, oh no, I am still this like kaiju turny person. And, you know, it kind of, it's nice that it's nice that this is now an accepted part of her character and her storyline is just, yeah, that happens. And that's just a backdrop to the really good story that's being told rather than like kaiju transformation of the week, which would be a very easy and lazy way to do this. So it makes me appreciate Kuro a lot more and extremely curious about what's going to happen because there's still some fallout from the whole like second volume music festival thing that hasn't quite come to light. Kuro's mum is starting to like, you know, there's, if anything, the main enigma at this point is not the kaiju, it's Kuro's mum because it's clear there's some shenanigans there and I'm endlessly curious to see what the heck is going to happen there. And yeah, I'm sure it's going to be okay because I don't think Kuro's mum's going to be a jerk, but I'm really interested to see what the hell happens there.
Yeah, and there is kind of a cliffhanger of sorts in this volume as well, which I assume Volume 4 will play into also. But yeah, I think Kuro's character as well, like it feels weird to say this about a series about a girl who turns into like a kind of off-brand Godzilla, but like there's something really relatable to her character as kind of like lived teenage experience throughout this, because yeah, like I think the two really strong things that come out of this volume are kind of Kuro, like, having found kind of like a boyfriend and somebody who accepts her and is in love with her. Like that kind of thing, that kind of relationship makes you want to be a better person and the best person you can be. And it can be a really kind of inspirational thing and a thing that kind of pushes you on to change in positive ways. And I think this volume like puts that across really well. But yeah, like you say, you know, it still doesn't mean that you're suddenly completely comfortable with yourself and everything is okay. Like, as much as you're doing well and having a pretty good time, like there are still points where you just hate yourself and want to scream into the void. And I think it captures all of that stuff in a really quite kind of beautifully sort of poignant way, and in its own kind of amusing comic way. Like you can read through all of this volume with a smile on your face, but there's also this kind of like underlying sort of thing of just like, yeah, I kind of like thinking back, I can kind of relate to all of this in some shape or form.
Yeah, totally. I think especially with like some of the things Arata does is like his trauma, his like overcoming things is less obvious on the front, but he's still doing some growing and it's kind of helping pulling them both along. Which is, even though this volume has very little of him, I kind of appreciate him as like an equal partner in this relationship rather than just the hot boy from volume 1. So that really helps.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of great that, yeah, they both have their own kind of weird hang-ups and kind of like, you know, cause there is a little bit of sort of misunderstandings, I guess, here. But again, like it's all kind of cleared up pretty quickly, and it's all a very kind of real sort of thing of like, you know, he's not going to want other people to like know we're going out, whereas he's like, what do you mean you don't want other people to know? Like, you know, that's hurting my feelings. And it's just the kind of typical kind of, you know, dancing around like, you know, what is the status of this relationship like in the public eye and that kind of thing, which, you know, I think works really well.
Yeah, totally. I mean, yeah, I've been in one of those dumb teenage relationships about, oh no, we can't tell anyone. 5 minutes later, everyone knows. So what the fuck happened there?
Yeah, absolutely. And final note is I really enjoy the author's like epilogue in this volume, which was basically like, yeah, I thought this thing was going to get cancelled, so I posted like the first chapter on Twitter. Now everyone's buying it, so thanks.
No, I really like that. It's also like one of these things where the editor's like, you just put it on Twitter. And it also explains why I keep saying manga authors do these like 10 tweet long threads with, you know, 4 or 4 pictures. I'm like, oh, I mean, also it works because if people are already there and you retweet one of the tweets, that's in people's timelines. And then hooray, you've managed to put a free chapter of manga in their feed. Like, it's a smart move. And I'm really glad as well that the series is doing well, because as you can probably tell from me gabbing about it, I'm really enjoying it. And the wait for the next volume is going to be even just as painful as for this volume. So cool, I guess. And this is definitely a series that it's just like, it's so obviously gonna do okay once you get the word out and get people to actually lay eyes on it, because, you know, once you
once you hear the conceit and kind of see what this series does with that conceit in terms of both story and just even the visuals, like I think it's a really enjoyable kind of, you know, mashing together of all the kind of kaiju tropes and then all the kind of shoujo manga tropes in this really kind of fun way. Like it's a really easy sell once you can get people to actually look at it. So it totally makes sense that was kind of the launching off point for them needing to reprint volumes, etc., etc. So yeah, good on them.
Yeah, totally. I mean, we've talked about it again in each time we've mentioned this series, but once you read it, it totally makes sense. And it's like, yep, this is good. This is a really good way of doing all this. Yeah, you can, the synopsis is a fun laugh, but then you open it and go, oh no, wait, this works. Cool. I'm glad. Like, hooray.
Yeah, indeed.
Cool.
Yes, so on to my other pick that I caught up on, and that is volume 4 of If I Could Reach You, which again we've talked about the previous 3 volumes of in various podcasts and at various lengths, and again, like, you know, come the end of volume 3, I was kind of keen to catch up and see what was going on with this series. And because
that's as far as I've gotten as well. I keep weakening and like buying volumes, even though I keep saying I won't. So whoops.
Yeah, I mean that sounds like a very Elliot Page problem, if I may say so.
No, yeah, correctly. I'm also like, I mean, I'll wait to see if volume 4 does it as well. But like volume 3 ends on like a pseudo cliffhanger that made me go, fuck, I want to buy volume 4.
Yeah. If nothing else, this series continues to be like the queen of the cliffhangers. Cause I honestly, like, this volume was almost the one where I was kind of like, yeah, you know what? I think I'm tapped out on it, because this volume, it's not really so much that it's spinning its wheels, but it feels like it's kind of got stuck in this holding pattern where it can't, like, none of the main kind of characters or story arcs seem like they have a good kind of escape to anything that allows them to progress significantly. So, like, despite everything that happened with Uta in volume 3, like, that whole kind of problem continues to kind of hang around and linger over her. There's some more kind of family shenanigans come into that, which sort of only make the whole thing more pronounced. You get to see some more stuff with Kilo, and, you know, there's some stuff going on in her relationship, which feels like it should be way more interesting than it is, to be honest. Like, there's like a kind of a progression and an issue that crops up as a result of that there, but it kind of gets handled in a way that did not particularly kind of, you know, make me sit up or have any more interest in it. And it does also delve into the backstory of, and it's my turn to forget a character's name now, but like the character who kind of like, comes into the scene as being the promiscuous one, effectively, in like volume 1. Is
it Chestnut? I don't know. I can only think of the word chestnut.
Yeah, we'll go with that, Chestnut. So like we finally get to see her backstory and kind of like why she's kind of ended up, you know, in the situation that she's in. And again, like that's one of the things, I guess, where again it goes a little bit kitchen sink drama, like in a way that I don't really particularly want from this series. Like, I feel like this series continues to be best when it's kind of inner monologues and kind of more subtle emotional states. When it kind of goes full bore, you know, kind of soap opera, it doesn't work quite as well. So again, like, this volume has some really nice little kind of just some nice little thoughts. Like, I feel like you could make a really good book of like of love-based motivational quotes out of this series, because it has some really good one-liners that just really succinctly kind of sum up, you know, love, unrequited love, all of that kind of stuff. Like, it just nails all of that so well, but then it also just kind of feels like it has to go into the sort of, you know, the seedier side of it all, if you like, as well, in ways that aren't so good.
Yeah, so, I feel like it did that. It kind of brings that in for some of the end of volume cliffhangers, but it does seem to do that where, you know, it sets up something that is interesting and there is a structure that is interesting to see play out, and you want to see how it's appraised, but then it kind of just jumps straight to the, as you say, the soap opera kitchen sink drama, where it undercuts all the hard work of its structure and also just belittles the characters almost, where it makes it a lot more boring, where it's like, oh, this was human and complex and emotionally taut and is now just like a one-liner you can put in like a synopsis, and that kind of sucks as a result. Like, it happens quite a lot. Like, I feel like it's one of the things that's happening with this. I mean, I've only read 3 volumes, not the 4th, but I feel like it keeps doing this to itself, where it keeps snookering itself with its different storylines, where each of the storylines feels like it should be like more load bearing, and forgive me my use of the phrase, but it should be more pregnant, like with meaning and something to do. But it seems to keep finding a way to both, like, even as it puts up cliffhangers, it manages to cut short the potential of them and make them a lot more base and boring. And also like the thing with Kuro, like, was really interesting in volume 2, but is now basically just a thing that is there and is not really on the boil anymore. And there's so many different, I mean, it does make a lot of hay out of people like reaching a hand out but not grasping the other person sort of thing. Like, it does a lot of that about like, oh, this could be solved by someone speaking up, but the act of doing that is extremely painful and might, like, is something that everyone is scared of, and so they're not going to, and whoops, next chapter. So yeah, that's kind of my feeling on the series.
Yeah, and ironically, that's kind of one of the best bits of Volume 4, where a character, and I won't spoil who, basically kind of comes in and says exactly that. Is like, you need to stop trying to be nice to people by, like, not telling them what you know they don't want to hear.
See, the thing is, like, I don't know which character set you're talking about there, because I'm pretty sure that, from my memory, that's been said at least 3 times from characters to themselves and to others. Like, I'm pretty sure Kuro has told Uta that at least twice. Like, straight up.
So that kind of comes into play again, but in a big way, that is kind of like, this is where I'm torn, because, you know, the cliffhanger sets itself up in such a way of like, okay, well, I want to see where this is going to go, because this is kind of like, you know, this is real crunch time for some of the stuff going on in the series. But at the same time, like, we've had those moments before, and it's always managed to pull it back to this holding, like, will they, won't they pattern. And so I'm kind of at the point of not particularly trusting it to actually follow through on that cliffhanger and really kind of go all in on it, which I think is kind of what the series needs at this point. Like, it needs something to sort of break the chain and break the cycle that it's currently stuck in, because so much is just kind of caught up in the issues that are well worn at this point, and there's not really anywhere left for it to go narratively. Like, it needs to shake things up pretty significantly, but I'm just not sure whether the series has the guts to do it. So this may be one where I wait to see what other people who I'm sure will buy Volume 5 have to say when it comes out, and maybe base my purchase or not on that.
Yeah, that's fair. I can totally get behind that. I mean, especially because, like, it's kind of clear that at some point there has to be an inciting incident that starts the dominoes falling, to use a very hackneyed metaphor, as if I can do anything else. But yeah, it like, you just know that at some point one part of this has to fall, and then everything else will fall afterwards. Like, there's going to be this sort of this, like, collateral damage / ongoing, you know, once one thing falls, everything else is going to fall. And, like, that has to happen at some point. And I'm almost slightly fearful that the author themselves can see it and is scared of doing it. So I don't know, like, again, like, it's one of these things where the end of volume cliffhangers are doing a lot to pull me along, but I think now I'm going to join you in the wait and see camp. Even though I've said that before at least twice, so more fool me, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I'm pretty sure I've said those exact words as well, and there's like, a new volume. But I don't know. This is the one where I feel like it's pulled that trick too many times. It's like, you know, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me, kind of thing. So I'll maybe hold my breath for the third time around.
Totally, I can understand that. So moving on to my returning champion, I've been continuing to read. I caught up with the latest. Well, not the latest, but the most recent purchased volume of So I Am a Spider, So What? The manga version. I'm on volume 6. I know we talked about it on the show previously. I think we did it as an actual show series. So I've reached a similar sort of place with this series where it's gotten so load bearing at this point, and there are so many different elements to the characters' inner monologue, and like, it almost feels like the amount of light novel it's covering in each manga volume is decreasing as it's getting more verbose and more explanatory and expository about the mechanics of this world the Spider Girl is in. And like, at this point, it's now, my interest in it has ground to a halt, mostly because, like, it goes through another series of, main character finds its way out of trouble, evolves into a new form, has like an extended sequence of talking to herself and just kind of going ham on all these mechanics, which were kind of cute and interesting and are now kind of overbearing in that the in-person action is secondary to the weird, like, stat screen stuff you see. And then about 3/4 of the way through the volume, it introduces, like, a gang of 10 quote-unquote supervillains who I'm sure are actually going to be the good people. Who knows? But it introduces all these other characters with this, like, cutaway to, like, a round table of evil. And don't care. Like, really, really strongly do not care. And at this point, I must admit, like, I'm kinda done. Like, my interest is it's still interesting when it wants to be interesting and have action. Like, but at the moment, the main character has gone back to a safer part of her subterranean life. And it's just not as interesting when there's not, like, as rude as it is, it's a lot less interesting when she's not, like, under danger of being squashed flat every chapter. But also, like, this expansion of the world with a cutaway from the main character into this, like, again, Council of Evil meeting, like, zero interest in that. Quite frankly, is in that I don't care about the greater state of the world. And it also makes me think that this series is going to, like, broaden in scope in a way that, again, I'm just not really that down for. So yeah, kind of done with this series now, unless if it goes on sale, I'll probably buy another volume just to see what happens next. And maybe that'll be a nail in the coffin. But yeah, I'm kind of done. I mostly wanted to bring this up because sometimes you just, like, fall off of manga and then you look back and go, yeah, I don't want to buy that. And this is kind of one of these cases where it's happened to me. So yeah, I'm just as I say, kind of finished up with this series at this point.
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like this was a series that people were kind of talking about on at least a semi-regular basis at some point, and then I just suddenly started hearing nothing about it, and it's like it was kind of jarring when I saw this turn up in the Google Doc. It was just like, oh yeah, this was a series, and this was a series we talked about, and we're kind of hot on, like, this must have been like one of the first episodes that we did, and it's like, oh yeah, like whatever happened to this series, and I guess now I know.
Yeah, I mean, even after volume 5, I wasn't that hot on continuing, and it was when I was doing a scan through Kobo to see if there was anything from Yen Press that I hadn't picked up recently, because I generally pick up stuff from Yen Press on Kobo because, frankly, it's cheaper there, and also the books are easier to get access to on my tablet. And, like, I was looking through it and I'm like, oh yeah, I was reading that, wasn't I? And my interest in continuing was already kind of low after volume 5, mostly just due to the fact that, like, again, the stat creep had started to occur where, you know, it almost has like a Dragon Ball Z style effect of, like, characters explaining the fight more than doing the actual damn fight. And so kind of made it dull. And then this volume kind of a bad combo of explanation and then this overlord thing, like, just yeah, so that's kind of, at least that's my personal thing, is like volume 5 is already enough and then volume 6 I'm now done. So that's kind of why, I suppose, part of the reason why everyone stopped talking about it. So
yeah, and I think a lot of these kind of series have a similar problem, which, you know, because I think that the fun part of this kind of series is watching, I mean, it's kind of like reincarnated as a slime, like I'll see how I feel after, like, the second season of the anime, but, like, that has a very similar cadence of kind of like, hey, somebody's reincarnated as a slime, so they have, like, zero power, and watching them kind of build up to a position of power is really enjoyable and satisfying, seeing them having to use their smarts and kind of like a sort of a limited set of skills and watch it grow to kind of fix issues is really interesting. But then there comes a point where, like, the power balance is skewed too far in their favor, and then it stops getting interesting pretty fast. And it kind of feels like, at least to some extent, this series kind of runs into that problem as well, that there's only so far you can go before it kind of just doesn't feel as intriguing anymore.
Yeah, totally. Especially, again, like, when it spends like 4, 5, 6 pages at a trot explaining basically stat screens within the manga itself. It's like, okay, we don't need all this. Please stop. Oh God. So yeah, that's So I'm a Spider, So What? The manga version, at least. It is kind of nice that there are still little bonus stories in the back of the volume. That's always nice. It's like, oh, a little bit of light novel. Hooray. An extra light novel, I suppose. Cool. So, moving on to the main part of the show, do you mind if I go first with my pick, Andy?
No, please do.
So, I picked a light novel because I like causing myself pain. Well, actually not so much. I just like taking up time because I suddenly got loads of it. So, I picked the light novel, Can Someone Please Explain What's Going On? Volume 1. So this is brought to us by J Novel Club. The author is, I'm going to mispronounce this, Sure Dure Banner. all one word, and is drawn by Rin Hagiwara, who has a very cute style, although the most generic one possible, but hey, whatever. The series is not currently complete. It's currently in its second volume chapter version in J-Novel Club, with a new EPUB to come soon, and it's up to 9 volumes in Japan, which is kind of wild. You can buy it from J-Novel Club, you can read it on J-Novel Club's site if you're a subscriber. You can also get it from ebook sites. I don't know if there's a physical version coming, probably not for a while yet. But so this is it's not a reincarnation story. It's not an isekai. It's a straight up fantasy. Straight up. Just a fantasy. Main character is called Viola, long surname, which I'm not going to remember. And she's a very generic kind of plain girl, at least she thinks she is, who is her family's part of like nobility in Fantasyland. They don't have massive reserves of wealth. If you've ever listened to or watched or read Pride and Prejudice, it's that kind of situation where the family have a bit of land and they are clearly not having to work that hard, but they are poor enough that they're having to figure out what they're going to do to survive in an era, especially when there's like a famine that happens. And this gets explained very quickly at the start. So basically Viola is extremely thrifty, extremely hardworking, and not comfortable to sit around. She's very restless. She's very engaged. She's very handsy. And one day, a man named Duke Physalis, probably mispronouncing that again, but whatever. He's an extremely, extremely pretty boy. He's probably the single most eligible bachelor in the kingdom. He turns up and goes, "Hey, I want to marry you, but there's a catch." And he takes her to one side and says, "Look, I'll be real with you. I've got a girlfriend. She's real hot. She's got big old titties. But she's a commoner. My family don't give a fuck. And I would like to marry you to get everyone off my back. And you'll be a show wife. But, you know, whatever. You can just live your own life. You can live happily in the castle. You just have to pretend to be my wife at occasions. And that's kind of it." And so Viola goes, "Well, you'll pay off my family's debt. So sure, fuck it. Why not? It can't be that bad." And so Viola goes to live at the Physalis Manor, which is huge and well explained. And she basically gets bored within about 4 minutes of being there, makes friends with all the servants, starts dressing up as a servant, and basically just runs around bugging everyone and like redecorating the mansion. And so frankly, this entire first volume is basically setup and prologue. And to give you an idea, the last line of this volume is the title, which 1, fuck you. 2, that's brilliant and I love it. And 3, fuck you. But yeah, so basically this entire setup is the entire volume is Viola trying to get a handle on her new life as a show bride, basically, but also just trying to make her life more interesting for herself because she's bored to tears living in this giant mansion. And things kind of very, very slowly go from there. And you know, as things progress, Duke Physalis starts to fall out of love with his current girlfriend, who he lives with on the grounds in a little cottage. And you can kind of guess where the trajectory of this is all going. But it takes the entire volume to do so, which is kind of wild, which is why I say that this entire first volume is set up and prologue. And also one thing that really, really pushes it along is that Viola, while a very adorable lass, is thicker than a 10 foot thick, like, pile of lead. Like, she is dense as all Christ. You could use her as a bomb shelter, quite frankly. She's so dense. Or she's also dense, but also just severely not wanting her, like, surprisingly enjoyable new life to be disrupted. And it's kind of cute as a result. Like, the story, like, the characters are nice. Like, the one thing I'll say about it is that the series kind of falls down in terms of tension because it never really explains what is so bad about the antagonist woman, like Candulula, or whatever her name is, Candula, I think. Like, it makes her out to be this, like, atrocious woman, but it's only really at the end that she says a few poisonous words and then walks off, and that's kind of it. And by the end of it, I actually felt quite bad for her that, like, she'd never managed to actually, like, come to blows or have conflict with the main character. And, like, the main character never actually comes to blows with her at all, apart from saying, like, 3 lines in the final, like, quote unquote conflict, which is really wild. And so, like, it's kind of cute and nice and fun, but it just feels kind of mean that the entire household staff really fucking hate this woman, who, at least it seems that actually was, like, a good lean to, or at least a good, it's a weird thing where like you can't really feel bad for her because she clearly was supplying something the Duke was badly in need of, which was outside perspective and frankly sex. And then at the end, she kind of gets discarded as this like evil stepmother, and it's like, well, no, anyway, maybe it's just me. But it's an enjoyable read. It's web novel style, so it's like 37 odd chapters, shortish chapters. It is enjoyable, but the one thing that kind of punctuates the series is slapping yourself on the forehead like Picard, because the main girl is so friggin' dense. And you can see the whole thing coming from a mile away, which is enjoyable in a way that it's kind of doofy and fun. And you know, it is still a pleasant read. Like it's very much like comfort food for the soul, almost, of just nice, pleasant, perhaps even almost overly pleasant, but fully made up like romance story with a twist. If anything, it's more a story about one person managing to find their own life and kind of enjoying things at their own pace in a very strict world. And that's kind of how I came down on it, really. What did you think of it, Andy? I feel kind of bad. Like, as I was reading through it, I felt kind of bad because I'm like, man, this is kind of a lot of pages for nothing too gripping.
Yeah, I mean, I did find myself asking the question, can someone please explain why nothing is going on, as a potential alternate title. But
she changed out the furniture in the parlour.
Yeah, I mean, as somebody who's been playing a lot of Animal Crossing, I feel like I should have appreciated that far more than I actually did. But no, I mean, like, joking aside, like, I was a little bit torn about this because I did kind of just like really enjoy the kind of laid back, like Viola has a good time hanging out with her maids and shit, because like there's something, her as a character and her inner monologues are kind of like enjoyable. Like she's just like self-deprecating enough to be kind of fun to read without being like too harsh on herself. And, like you say, she is pretty dense at times throughout the series. And, you know, that kind of has a certain charm to it. But ironically, kind of, I found myself turning around sort of against the series once I realized like, oh, this isn't going to be it. Like there's going to be a thing that happens that's
this isn't going to end anytime soon.
Yeah, but yeah, because it's like, oh, you know, the fact that, and in a way, it's sort of like sharing the main character's like despair. Like, you know, once Physalis kind of starts hanging out more, it's like, oh, can he just go away? Because like, I'm not really interested in his deal, or like, you know, who his romantic interest is in. Like, can we not just, you know, like grow some more flowers and stuff? Because I was kind of quite chilled out just having a relatively calm, carefree daily life there. So yeah, I don't know. Like there was something to this. Like there is definitely a sort of a chill out enjoyment to a lot of it, because it is pretty laid back, and like even its high drama is more of a kind of like, oh, this is like going to be mildly irritating for me kind of thing. So I did kind of like that in a sense, but at the same time, it was a lot of book to do that. You know, I feel like I could have got kind of the gist of this and got my enjoyment out of it in far shorter order, than kind of having to churn through this entire volume of kind of going into all of it in sometimes great detail, which was, you know, not necessarily required. So yeah, I don't know. I was weirdly torn on it, because there is a part of me that liked this, and then there was also probably an equal part of me that was kind of like not really into it at all. And I was kind of vacillating between those two states. Like, I think more as the book went on, of just like, I both really want something massive and major to happen to shake all of this up, but at the same time, I really don't, because I have a certain amount of enjoyment over it just being what it is. So yeah, like I'm very much kind of sat in the middle of just like, I don't know. Like, I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's a weird thing where, like, I enjoy the extended cast of characters, like the groundskeeper and the weird chef and the two maids that kind of hang around Viola the whole time. It was kind of funny as well that, like, it takes zero time at all. Like, in fact, it marries off, like, those main characters, those side characters together in, like, one chapter each, where it's just like, yep, we're married. And it's like, oh, okay. I guess there's not going to be, like, a romance polygon going on here because they've married off all the eligible males, which, you know, whatever. And it's it is the sort of thing where I look at the structure of it and how, you know, it's a web novel, and I feel like having it in a single book makes it more tiresome in a way. Whereas if I was reading this like week on week, I suppose, with these individual small chunks, it'd probably be a lot more digestible of like, oh, I wonder what they're going to get up to this time. Whereas reading the entire thing as a contiguous novel means that at some points you are sat there reading it going, man, they need to kind of get on with this. Like, I kind of just want to see, like, especially when you look back, because you can look back on it and basically just concatenate entire sections of the book into several lines, and you just, you just squish it together, and it suddenly seems a lot more efficient that way. But yeah, I am with you that it's very long. And also, I mean, I admit, like, after I finished reading this, I looked up the details of it, and like, there's 9 volumes in Japan, and I have no idea how it's going to keep that going for that long. Like, that's a lot of volumes to try and fill. But then again, the end of this first volume ends in a big reset of the world state of like, oh shit, things are going to change now. Oh crap. So God knows what's going to happen next.
Yeah. Well, and ironically, I mean, it does also set up some kind of like deeper world building of like, there's a kind of like slightly fractious conflict with this neighboring nation that, we mostly managed to keep to one side, but it's a bit of a powder keg. So like, I find myself thinking like, maybe there's a future volume that it just goes to like full on war book or something. And it's just like, I know Viola has to like, become the general of some kind of army or something. So who knows where it could go.
Yeah, because there is like a surprising amount of like basically passive world building about the different like areas of the kingdom where they live, and talk about regional cuisine, which was quite cute. Good food descriptions as always. But also like, it's kind of clear that Cersis, Cersis Physalis, the Duke's name, I'm pretty sure he's like fantasy CIA or some bullshit. Like, it's kind of clear that he is like high up in some weird psyop military garbage. So who knows? Maybe we'll get kidnapped at some point or tortured. Who knows? But it's kind of clear that his like job, either that or I'm reading too much, I'm overly reading into something that's quite base because I want it to be more interesting. But who knows?
Yeah.
But that's my read on it.
Yeah, there's definitely directions it could go, and probably won't, but there you go.
Well, you never know. I mean, like, I might, frankly, the first part of volume 2 is available on J Novel Club to read, even if you don't have the subscription. So I might just read it to see what the second volume starts doing.
Yeah, see if they explain what is going on.
Well, they kind of did at the end of the first one. It's just that Viola's the only one who's dense enough not to realise what the fuck's going on.
This is true. But yeah, like, I mean, if there's any, like, it makes me wonder if there's some kind of like grand prize in light novels for like latest title drop, because if so, like, the series has just like won it forevermore, and I will give it all credit for that.
Yeah. I mean, I've just been to pivot back to video games very briefly. I completed Assassin's Creed Origins, which after you complete the very last final storyline mission, it brings up the title card, and I dropped my PlayStation 4 controller and clapped because fuck you. That takes some balls. I love that garbage. I love it, even though it makes me swear. So yeah, I mean, the weird thing about this book is that it was enjoyable. It was an interesting read. It was just a really fucking long one. So that's kind of the biggest ding on it, is that it was quite long, like 200 odd pages of just quite dense, well, not dense, but just a lot of prose. Like, it wasn't hard to, it was very easy to read. It's just, there's a lot of it. So
yeah,
the amount of pictures in this is very low. I could have done with more pictures, honestly, which sounds, I sound like a 3-year-old, but you get what I mean.
Yeah, I did quite like the illustrations, and I think you do make a good point about his kind of like, source as a web novel, because I think if I was to make a recommendation to anybody reading this, it's like, don't binge it in big sessions, probably like read it a chapter or two at a time and kind of take it slow, and maybe just as a kind of little kind of time filler for 10-20 minutes every day or once a week or whatever, like, because I think it probably does sit better when you just consume it in small chunks, whereas I think we both kind of just crammed it all into our faces as quickly as possible, which is probably a suboptimal way to read a book like this. Yeah,
it's one of these cases where like having a fortnightly podcast is not conducive to slowly consuming a light novel, at least for one. I mean, unless we've both read it previously, so there's usually be one of us who are having to cram. But yeah, at the same time, it's inoffensive. I did enjoy the like extremely low stakes house redecorating stuff. And, from as being someone who like doesn't really decorate that often, like I recently bought like a sunflower, and it really brightens the place up. Like, forgive me for being so boring, but like, it is these things where it's like, oh, the house is a lot more interesting now that there's like one plant. Because before it looked like a fucking box with a microphone in the middle of it. So yeah, it does. I mean, like the switch that happens later does make perfect sense, even if it is annoying for everyone involved. So yeah. But yeah, we'll see what happens. I mean, if anything, it'd be interesting to see what happens in volume 2, because now, like, the fake marriage might turn into a real one, ? Oh God. Like, poor Viola. So, yeah. So yeah, that's, can someone please explain what's going on? The light novel, as mentioned on J Novel Club. Volume 2 will be finishing up soon, I think, on their website. So yeah, you can go have a little peek at that. So, cool. And so moving on to the second part of today's episode, is your pick, Andy. Do you want to take it away?
Yeah, tonal shifting coming, I will say. So my pick for this episode is The God's Lie, which is a one-shot single-volume series from Karu Ozaki, published by Vertical, available in all of the usual digital places and in physical form. It's a series that I've just kind of seen floating around without knowing anything about it, and I kind of read the synopsis and thought, yeah, this sounds like something that might be for me, and so I figured I would check it out. The God's Lie is the story of a kid called Natsuru Nanao. He's 11 years old, and we kind of join him for an adventurous quote-unquote summer, where he's basically transferred in from Tokyo. His dad has passed away, so he kind of lives with his single mum. He's big into football, but kind of finds, much to his kind of chagrin, that his football coach, who's kind of like a kindly old teacher at his school, has fallen ill. So has basically been replaced by a bit of a jerk who's like a kind of a know-it-all, former pro coach or whatever, who's effectively kind of, it's a big tonal shift for him from the kind of like happy, like, hey, just kick a ball about and have fun, to like, no, here's your strict training regime, to make you a good player. And he seems to kind of have it in for Natsuru a little bit. He kind of is constantly critiquing him and stuff, which he really doesn't appreciate. And there's kind of a very clear suggestion that kind of this football coach has almost been a bit of a father figure to him, given that his father is no longer with him. But anyway, at some point he kind of finds a stray cat, which he can't keep because his mum is allergic to cats, but ends up running into a classmate of his, Ryo Suzumura, who, basically says, hey, like, if you'll give me some money for food, then, like, I'll take the cat in. And as it turns out, like, Ryo basically lives alone with her little brother. Like, her dad is away fishing in Alaska, supposedly. And so she basically kind of says, like, hey, keep this a secret for obvious reasons, because, if the authorities found out that an 11-year-old and her younger brother were living on their own 24/7, they would probably have some things to say. Kind of things really kind of reach a pivotal point when Nano decides to ditch his kind of summer soccer camp, because, as mentioned, really not a fan of the teacher, and kind of, rather than telling his mum that he's not doing it, he basically decides, like, okay, well, I'm just going to kind of go it alone for however many days this camp is, and just hope that she doesn't find out, which kind of leaves him in the end to just staying with Suzu, because he runs into her while he's just kind of hanging around figuring out what to do. And she basically says, like, hey, if you want to pay for your, like, bed and board effectively, then you can just stay in our house, because, there's no one else around. And so there's kind of, at that point, there's almost sort of a little segment here that is sort of like idyllic childhood adventure of these kids who are kind of, unfettered from their parents or whatever, just kind of having a bit of a good time and sort of, doing what they like, and, they can cook and basically look after themselves and kind of goof around a bit. But then things start to take a turn. Like, it becomes clear that Ryo's dad is not coming back anytime soon. Like, he very nebulously promises, apparently, that he's going to come back before, like, the big summer festival, and then, of course, doesn't actually appear. And everything really just starts to fall apart pretty rapidly at that point. There are some very shocking revelations, about kind of the further reasons why Ryo and her brother are living alone at home. Nano just kind of like gets drawn into this very unexpected maelstrom that he kind of really struggles to deal with, on top of his own kind of problems. And then in the end, in that very kind of childish way, they decide, well, the easiest way to fix all these problems is just to run away from them all. And so they try to run away, which of course they do in an incredibly like ham-fisted fashion. It doesn't last for very long. And at some point, the whole thing turns from this kind of like quite bright and breezy sort of summer adventure into this real kind of this real kind of examination of sort of childhood loneliness. And I will not lie, I spent basically like the final chunk of this book just crying. I was just like, there is something incredibly emotionally affecting about the tonal shift in this series and the way that it shifts from, you know, being kind of some relatively happy childhood times to just the surfacing of all these kind of unpleasant childhood memories, and the fact that both of these kind of two characters who have fallen in together are both incredibly lonely and kind of find solace in one another, but it's still not enough to really help with anything. And it's a really kind of... the end of this book just does a really good job of just like conveying that emotion without ever really directly saying it. Like,
oh, totally.
None of the emotions that are kind of put forth throughout this book are kind of directly spoken about by any of these characters. They're always, especially when you get to the end of it, you realize how much of that kind of like that hurt and that loneliness has just been kind of lingering in the background and in the minds of these characters, and then it all just kind of like pours out, but in this very indirect way. And yeah, like it's a really good book. Like I've not been moved this much by something that I've read in quite a while, and especially coming in the way that it does, it kind of really caught me by surprise. I mean, literally, like, between two panels, like, there's this fantastic panel where, like, Nano and Suzu, they just hug. Like, they just have this moment where they both just, like, have this sudden realization that what they actually need is just somebody else who cares for them, just anybody who will care for them in that moment. And that just broke me, because it's just like this incredible singular moment of just like realization for these kind of two kids that kind of everything that they were sort of hoping for has just kind of like vanished and is not coming back anytime soon. And then that kind of coupled with just this sort of crippling sense that there is nobody there for them. And it's just, from that point on, it was just like, I was just kind of an emotional wreck, but in a good way, in terms of that was exactly what the book was intending for me to do. And, so yeah, like, I really, really enjoyed this. Like, it's, I really like the character designs, the illustrations. I think, you know, the way the whole thing is put together is incredibly strong. And, yeah, like, I really, as long as you don't mind being reduced to tears, then I highly recommend it.
Yeah, I'm mostly there with you. It didn't hit me quite as hard, mostly because I'm going to sound like a real frigging buzzkill here, so apologies, Andy, and everyone listening, but I kind of, at some point, entered into this really intense analytical mode when I was reading this, partially as a way to prevent myself from turning into a crumpled crying heap, because you know as well as anyone how easily I cry. I mean, you've probably seen me cry at SLA enough times, for God's sake. But this series, this volume, this single one shot is like a masterclass in, as you say, like not having to actually voice anything out loud. Like the closest, the absolute closest it gets to voicing any of the like roiling, horrible magma of emotions is like Nano trying to explain why he didn't want to go to summer camp. And he really can't. Like, he can't, but he voices it the best way he can when he's like, I couldn't bring myself to walk forward anymore. And that's it. That's as close as it gets to analyzing it. And the characters both know what that means, and they they kind of continue from there. And I think the strongest part of this, series, this volume, this one shot, is that it doesn't explicitly say virtually anything, but you get everything. Like, everything that it wants to communicate is clearly and perfectly provided. And also, like, in a more sort of boring way, like, the characters are doing the best they damn well can. Like, Natsuro, like, he didn't want to go to football camp, but he decides to do so because his mum is like, she writes light novels for her job, so you know she's terrible. Nah, she's fine. But she's in a complete slump, and he says, look, I'll get out the way. You don't have to cook for me. You can get on with your work. I will get out of the way. And he, as I say, like, it then starts their rather strange, like, 3-day summer where, you know, 3 days basically might as well be a whole nother lifetime for the pair and the little brother, who is also awesome. Like, I love that. I think it's Yuki. I think he's awesome. The little brother is actually amazing. You've got a little brother character who isn't an annoying little shit. And in fact is really cool and like the secret third character of this. but it's perfectly paced. Like, it does a lot of amazing stuff where the panel layout isn't like fantastic. Like, it isn't like, sorry, it's good, but it's not like trying new experimental methods, but it has loads of intelligent, smart ways of bridging panels. Like, it'll do a cutaway to something else as an interim bridge. So it saves itself like several pages of explaining stuff. Like, there is a plot development towards the end, which you knew was going to happen, but it doesn't waste time dragging it out. It just shows you like a wordless inset panel while something else is happening. And it's like, okay, I know what's happening entirely. You've saved lots of time. And so like the entire first chapter of this is this really amazing languid introduction to the main characters, you know, about Nano's kind of loneliness and his attempts to fit in, which get completely and utterly destroyed because 11-year-olds are crap at Valentine's Day, as it turns out. And the introduction of Rio, who is an amazing character. Like, she's so stupidly strong because she's basically having to be held up her entire family for most of her life. And, you know, she doesn't have anything to lean on. And the thing I keep trying to get around to saying is that basically also, like, these are two characters who are not idiots. Like, they do run away because it's the only thing they've got left as adoption. Like, there is nothing for them to do because they are stuck in a situation that sucks. Like, they don't have, like, emotionally, they don't have the support. They don't physically have the support in the case of Rio, who is like scraping by money, expecting her dad to turn back up again, who fucking doesn't. And like that wraps up really well. There's even like some really, like, every single thing that is mentioned is wrapped up or referenced back in another way, which is really fascinating. And it's not obviously all to the good. But this is very clearly like a very heartfelt story about two people who have found, like, you know, they find a secondary family together, like, in a very strange way because there's nothing else for them. It reminds me vaguely of Weathering with You, where, again, another part of that movie is that, like, kid runs away because, like, doesn't know how to handle, etc. And that's a really good, I love that. I love that movie. But anyway, The Gods Lie is equally sort of poignant and like far, and I'd say perhaps more hard hitting. And it does an awful lot with a little because it squeezes every last drop out of what it has. Sorry, I went completely long on what was going to be 1 or 2 points. Sorry, Andy. But no, I mean, like, maybe you had a different focus on it from the emotional end, but like for me, it was a case of definitely these characters like stuck. Like, they can't go for help because if they try and find help, they're probably going to split Rio and her brother up. And like, as she says at one point, they're going to splash us all over the tabloids and I don't want to make trouble for anyone. And like, that fear, which is very real, is utterly devastating because it snookers everyone involved in this horrible catch-22 situation. And like, I feel like, with the exception of perhaps 1 or 2 adults, like, there are adults who are good in this series, which is nice because it's very easy to do this whole, like, kids coming of age, etc., story where all the adults suck nuts. Whereas in this case, like, Natsuru's mum is cool, like, especially towards the end when it comes to the resolution where she kind of does the best thing she can. And you meet the old soccer coach at one point, which is like a short but extremely powerful section where it doesn't belabor it. It's just, oh, you knew this was going to happen at some point, didn't you, reader? Okay, here we go. We're going to resolve this emotional, like, 50-ton weight that we've had hanging over your head like a sword of Damocles. And it's all that stuff that makes it extremely powerful because it's really fascinating. And it also, this is another series that drops the title right at the end, but does so in a really kind of intense, like, it's teed you up the entire volume and now it's going to swing a sledgehammer at your leg sort of thing, where it's like, oh fuck, I'm a wreck. This totally worked.
Yeah, I mean, I think kind of to extrapolate on what you were saying about the characters and Rio in particular, but I think like both of the main characters, like, they're really well written 11-year-olds because
totally.
Kind of 11 is an age where, yeah, if push comes to shove, you could go out and buy the groceries, you could figure out how to do the laundry, you could probably look after a little brother. But also, if your dad's told you, I'll be back by the festival, like, not meaning that literally at all, you would probably take that literally as gospel. Like, I think that's the beauty of how these characters are written, is that, like, neither of them are stupid, and they're both more than capable of kind of looking after themselves or other people around them to a certain extent, but they are also still very much children and have a very childlike view on certain things that is, you know, very, very binary and, you know, not understanding of the nuances of kind of the adult world around them. And I think that's the thing that really kind of makes this series work, because I was a little bit worried when this book started with like, oh, hi, I'm 11 years old, because it's like, this is going to be either 11-year-old written by an adult who's going to be like a smart ass who's kind of reads as at least a teenager or older, or the exact opposite of they're just going to be a complete like little kid that is not going to kind of comprehend anything. And like, I think it's a really hard age to write well, but I think like this book does it incredibly well. Like, it absolutely nails how I suspect characters of this kind of age would act in these kind of situations, in terms of where they do the right thing and they have kind of the realization, like you say, with Nano, kind of like realizing like, I'm just in my mum's hair, like I should probably offer to like get out of a way for a bit. But also to have this very kind of, you know, childish view on certain things of just like, you know, the most extreme solution is the only way to do this, because, you know, we can't do anything else. And I think it does that so well. And that's what makes the whole thing kind of far more affecting, I think, when it kind of gets into its final reckoning, because this isn't the kind of book where you sit there kind of shouting like, why are you doing that to the characters? Because like you say, everything they do makes logical sense within their own mindsets and their own kind of sets of experience, and you know, there's not really any kind of room where you can point and say like, well, why didn't they just ... Well,
it's also because that's all they really, in some cases, it's all they really can do, because it's all that's in their power to do as 11-year-olds. I mean, it really tees up the characters really well, especially like at the start where it gets you into Natsuru's head really quickly, where like the things that are devastating to him and causing him to reevaluate his entire worldview. I mean, obviously he's lost his dad, like that sucks nuts, but he's making peace with it very slowly in his own time. But like, it's the small things that really throw him for a tilt. Like, you know, again, the football coach changing, the football coach saying some really shitty stuff, where I don't think the football coach is like, the new football coach is trying to be a shit, but like manages to say it in the single worst way. And also like when he's like, one scene that really got me is, well, not got me, but I kind of really got the character, is when he's talking to a friend, because he skipped practice. His friend comes along and goes, hey, how's it going? Here's a lollipop. You skipped practice. And then Natsuru says, yeah, let's do soccer. It'd be great. We'll be middle schoolers. And then his friend says, oh no, I've got to take over the family farm. I'm going to do judo next year. And he's like, oh, okay. I thought we were, well, shit. And then he's just kind of sat there, because like, what do you do? Like, you're 11. What the fuck? How do you decide what is important in that moment? Like, what do you do? And yeah, as you say, like you do get all the introductions are really effortless in that. Again, you get the introduction of Rio, who like she's very tall for her age. She's clearly gotten her growth spurt early, and it's this thing where like all the rest of the girls in the class are like, you know, they're being shitty kids, so tweens. So but the thing is also like, the one thing about this as well is it's a one shot, and it doesn't waste a single page, but also doesn't outstay its welcome by a single page. Like, it's a really perfectly sized, like, single item. Like, as a work, it's really perfectly sized and scoped, and like, it keeps you gripped for the entire time. Like, I read this entire thing in one sitting, and it's very easy to do so, even if you are kind of like screwing up your face as part of it. So it's really, as a result, really intensely good read. Really powerful stuff. Also, as a quick side note, I've had this in my ebook library since 2017 because I've always been scared to read it. I don't know. Like, I always looked at the cover and went, oh, fuck. Like, this isn't going to end well. So I always kept away from it. But yeah, I remember once when I tried to pick up a copy physically at an Otakon, and I was told by the vendor at Vertical Booth saying, yep, it's all gone. People love it. I'm like, great. Like, good. Damn it, I didn't get a copy. But yeah, for me, it's like it's perfectly formed, like, work as a result.
Yeah. Like, I mean, for any single volume thing, there's always that kind of like, am I just going to be left thinking like, oh man, I wish there was more of this, but no, like it ends exactly where it needs to end, and yeah, like it couldn't be any longer, it couldn't be any shorter, it's exactly where it needs to be, and yeah, like it's definitely like very high up there in my kind of esteem, and like I say, I'm very much kind of a sucker for this kind of story anyway, so it was exactly what I wanted it to be ultimately.
Totally. I mean, also, like, this can sound real stupid, but it also sticks the landing completely, which is extremely hard. Like, trying to find a balance emotionally and, like, in the final reckoning of the story is very difficult for this kind of story, because it's very easy to over-egg it one way or another. And, you know, I don't know, like, I always think back to when I watched the the Garden of Words at Scotland Loves Anime. And I remember, like, I think we were all together then, but I came out of the cinema and everyone going, oh, well, that ending was a bit weird because it just didn't quite stick the landing or make it all come together in the final reckoning. Like, the pieces didn't quite fit, at least for me. And it was a case of like, woulda, coulda, shoulda. Whereas in this series, I like finished it. I'm like, great. You did it. You completed. You did everything. You're done. I enjoyed it. I've gone through the bit of an emotional ringer, but it's ended perfectly. In kind of a really intense way. Like it's still open ended in some ways, but you can tell that like the storm has passed and now we're going on into the future. So yeah, I'll tell you one thing though. If they made an OAV of this, I'd friggin' love it. Like, get Kyoto Animation on it, but we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, I'd love an OAV of this. It'd be fucking great.
Yeah. I mean, it's the kind of thing. Yeah, you can imagine Naoko Yamada knocking out of the park for KyoAni if she were to direct something like this. But yeah, like it's definitely. It would definitely fit to be a good kind of like hour 90-minute film. You can definitely imagine that. But yeah, that would definitely be not a dry eye in the house job, I suspect.
Yeah, it also does have it has a lot of really good understated like motifs and stuff. Like again, it doesn't shove them in your face. Like, you know, on the cover you'll see there are some flowers in the foreground and they're the same flowers that's on Ryo's yukata, and it's that sort of stuff. Like it has a real good efficiency of elements. And, you know, you can see things coming from a mile away at the start, but the way it paces them and the way it doles them out and the way it sets them up is just pitch perfect. And yeah, I love this a great deal. As I say, like at some point I started doing a hyper analysis and just the pacing of it is seamless. Like it has pacing both languid and engaged, and it really just picks you up and carries you along for the distance, even if you are in fact tearing up.
Yeah, and it's all the more powerful because it does that so subtly. I mean, having talked, you know, about If I Could Reach You and kind of going like kitchen sink drama and soap opera, like this never really, even at its most kind of dramatic kind of like soap opera-y point of this book, it doesn't feel like it's dropped it in there as a bit of kitchen sink drama. Like it feels like an actual considered part of the narrative that is there for very good reason, and it's not just there as a like, oh wow, like this is a big thing. And I think, you know, because that was a point when there's a plot point here where I was just like, oh, this is going in a direction I was not expecting, but it doesn't over egg that, or it doesn't, you know, it doesn't go full bore on it. It's incredibly important to the story, but it is not the kind of thing that it just kind of plays for sort of, you know, titillation almost, if you like, as just like, oh, look at this crazy thing. Like it's just, it feels real and believable within the framework that it's laid out for it.
I'd like to talk to you off mic about like what bit surprised you, because I don't think there were, for me at least, there were any huge surprises. Like there were certainly surprising moments, but I'm like, for me at least, a lot of the storyline I was like, oh, okay, this is happening. And the main sort of benefit of that was that it still continued to execute on it extremely, extremely well. So that's, you know, even better as a result. Cool. So, but yeah, is there anything else that you want to mention about this, Andy?
No, I think I've gushed about it quite enough. So yeah, people should just go read it, to be quite honest.
Yeah, it's super, super good. Also, like if you're not sold yet somehow, like the Kodansha Comics website has the first chapter up for free reading on their website. So go ahead and look at that. And if you're in any way partially, if so slightly interested, I recommend picking it up. It's a real good read.
For sure.
Cool. So that is moving into close down. What we're going to be talking about next episode. So after kind of being put through the ringer by the God's Lie and some other stuff, I wanted to pick something a little more lighthearted and stupid. And so I have picked the first volume of the manga Plus Size Elf. Which I've read several volumes of, and I want to inflict it upon Andy. Sorry, Andy. It's not as bad as it sounds, I swear to God. Anyway, Andy, how about you?
Yeah, so as mentioned, I mean, I think basically to give you a glimpse behind the curtain, I think we both basically made a pact of like, we should just pick happier things for the next show, given some of the stuff we've read recently. And so I thought, well, what is happier than cute kittens? So I have picked Choose Sweet Home Volume 1.
So, moving into the close down, you can find our website at Screentone.club, where you can find all our previous episodes, including the Manga Plus bonus episode we released last week. So go back and grab that if you haven't already. If you like the podcast, please tell a friend. Word of mouth and social media coverage is like still the strongest way to support podcasts and spread the word. If you've got friends who are bored, hey, we've got 50 plus episodes of content ready to go. If they like manga, even better. So, also, if you can possibly leave us a review on your podcatcher service of choice, that stuff is also a massive help. Thank you ever so much. And as mentioned, we have a Patreon. If you're feeling so inclined, you can support us. And that really, really helps keep the lights on and really gives us a warm, fuzzy feeling. You can also follow us on Twitter at Screentone Club. You can tweet at us, all that malarkey. You can also email us, show@screentone.club. For personal plugs, my name's Elliot Page. You can find me at Elliot Page on Twitter, where I'm posting pictures of baking mostly and the local hillside. Lockdown is making me turn boring and silly. But yeah, and how about you, Andy?
If you want to find out more about the courtroom that I built in Animal Crossing, you can find me on Twitter at Hannah's1979.
You trying to recreate Phoenix Wright? Maybe. So thank you very much for listening, and hope you'll join us again next time. So thank you very much, and good night.
Bye, everyone.